Oh yeah, he's doing good. Mine is too dark now. I gotta go next one.
My granddaughter, the 6-year-old came by today.
She had the stuff right in her case.
She had this stuff, and I said, Maggie, I want to.
Also, I remember because I got a cramped
That's right.
thing from after I finished. I couldn't.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, as you know, this is a Green Party organizing day. There'll be 6 areas around the state where people like yourselves are coming out. Some of you already members of the Green Party, others wanting to know what it's all about. And what it's all about is pretty obvious. Most people in this country are pretty fed up with the Republicans and Democrats becoming not only beholden to these powerful corporate interests, but becoming more and more alike. I describe them as one corporate party with 2 heads wearing different makeup so they can let you distinguish them from one another. And that just isn't good enough. You know, Thomas Jefferson once said the purpose of representative government is to counteract the excesses of the moneyed interests, as he called them. And they're not doing that. They are surrendering to the moneyed interests. And if you look around and see why we have such problems in our country, they're usually traceable to too much power in too few hands. Too much power and wealth in too few hands, the few controlling the many. That's the lesson of history. Whenever that happens, we get in trouble as a society, and when we deconcentrate the control, let workers and small taxpayers, consumers, and voters share some of that control, we are better off. That happened the farmers up against the banks and railroads years ago. It happened with workers organizing themselves in trade unions against the auto and steel and coal mining industry. It happened most prominently when we abolished slavery. That's a deconcentration of power. The big farm plantations in the South growing cotton on the backs of human slaves. And when people got the right to vote, women were denied the right to vote. African Americans really couldn't vote for years. More people got the right to vote. I noticed that even Strom Thurmond in the U.S. Senate, he's now all for civil rights. I wonder why. Because now there are voters in South Carolina who are African Americans who could vote against him. So here he is, all for civil rights. And increasingly, if we're strong at the community level, it almost is axiomatic that the politicians will listen to us, even if they don't want to, because as long as they want their job, they're going to have to listen to us. I remember when I started going down to Washington and pressing for consumer safety legislation, like motor vehicle safety, I was introduced to a senator whose name was Warren Magnuson from the state of Washington. And he was the powerful chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee. And you couldn't get anything through the Senate on auto safety if you didn't get past him. And this was around 1965. And, you know, there's a lot of tumult in the country and demonstrations and activities. He went from a totally business Democrat, he'd do anything corporations wanted to do, to the most spectacular consumer champion in American history. That's because he felt the people back home were going to really judge him on what he did for them as consumers of food, automobiles, insurance, banking, etc., not what corporations wanted him to do. So I never forgot that lesson. And right now, we're very weak as citizens in our country. Very weak. Weaker than we've been maybe in 60 years. As consumers, we're signing on the dotted line and paying through the nose. When we sign on the dotted line, you know what that means? Increasingly, we're giving up our rights to go to court, our rights to have our side of the story respected under the law. And most of us have never done anything but sign on the dotted line. We go to a bank and open an account, we sign on the dotted line. We buy an auto insurance policy, we sign on a dotted line. We go to a hospital and get surgery, we sign on a dotted line. And all the fine print is printed by the seller. And they're not about to look out for us, they're looking out for them. And if you build this up over time, our expectation levels are so low that when a credit card company last May announced that if any of their customers quit them, they're going to charge them $25. Nobody says? Advantage. If you quit, we'll charge you $25. And a lot of people every day are signing on the dotted line, agreeing if they have a conflict with the seller, a complaint, they would not go to court, they would not exercise their constitutional rights, they have to go to compulsory arbitration. Well, if you get injured by a defective product, like the Dalcon Shield mutilated hundreds of thousands of women, asbestos killed tens of thousands of workers, and if you finally get the facts and you learn that the company knew it was dangerous, covered up, kept selling it, didn't warn you, you got sick, or your members of family got sick, and you want to go to court and have your day in court, which our forebears fought King George III for, Senator Lieberman and Senator Dodd think you have too much power. And they're pushing laws in Congress to tie the hands of Connecticut judges and Connecticut juries so that if you or your friend are injured and you want to hold the company who injured you responsible and help make the product safer in the future, you will have an even bigger uphill role to surmount, because they want to put all kinds of restrictions on what the judges and juries can decide. Now, if I had a choice, and I had a choice between absentee legislators in Washington, greased by the money of the oil industry, chemical industry, drug industry, etc., deciding what my day in court is going to be like, or local judges and juries, the only people who see, hear, and evaluate the evidence, I wouldn't have trouble choosing. I'd pick the local judges and juries. And I'd also say, why aren't we opening the doors so we can use the courts more easily? Because 9 out of 10 people who are wrongfully injured don't even file a lawsuit. It's so hard to win these cases. So, even though it's hard to win these cases, Lieberman and Dodd want to make it more difficult for us to win these cases. Even though medical malpractice costs this country $60 billion a year and kills over 80,000 people a year just in hospitals, not in emergency rooms or inner city clinics, just in hospitals. That's more than the number of homicides, motor vehicle fatalities, and death by fire combined. Lieberman and Dodd want to make it even more difficult for hospitals and doctors who are negligent or careless or even criminally greedy to be held accountable to the people whose lives they take or whose injuries they inflict. As if that's not enough, you know the hamburger E. coli thing in the news?
Burger King.
What do you think Dodd and Lieberman are going to do when they go back to Washington after Labor Day? They are going to support legislation which for the first time in 91 years will weaken the Food and Drug Administration's ability and authority to make sure the medicines you take and the medical devices that may be implanted in you and the labeling on the food is less likely to be safe. And that's called the FDA Modernization Bill. You know how they give these laws fancy, good-sounding names? Not 91 years has any Congress weakened the FDA. Now here we have the food contamination. Every day this week, I've read articles. Oysters contaminated in the state of Washington. E. coli hamburger. Chicken with salmonella. And instead of strengthening the food and drug laws, Senators Lieberman and Dodd are going to weaken them. Why? Because they're not hearing enough from us? Because there isn't an alternative party that can throw the rascals out? And because they're getting too much money from the drug industry and the pharmaceutical industry and the securities industry, etc. Senator Dodd Senator Dodd even overturned Clinton's veto, the Crooks and Swindlers Protection Act 2 years ago, that made it more difficult. That law, which he put his name on, made it more difficult for savers and small investors who were swindled to go to court and get their money back. And why? Because he met many times with big accounting firms and the securities firms in Wall Street, and they poured money into the Democratic Party and into his campaign. And the same is true for the insurance industry. So this is just a microcosm of a bigger story. And the bigger story is that our politics has been being controlled by big business who have less and less allegiance to our country, who are easy to export jobs, to bring workers to their knees, to make taxpayers subsidize them in corporate welfare, to defraud consumers, and to corrupt our government, as if that's not enough. And the only way we're going to change this is the way it's been done in the past, is for enough people who are neighbors, co-workers, fellow citizens, to mobilize on two tracks, to swell the power of citizen groups like environmental groups and health reform groups, etc., and to build a powerful Green Party or any other progressive party to challenge the two parties to begin deciding the margin of victory between the two major parties and then eventually to beat them. Now there are a number of local candidates the Greens are fielding in Hartford and elsewhere around the state. They're just getting underway, and there are so many areas and so many opportunities for Green Party advocates to make breakthroughs and get things done because the Republicans and Democrats have abandoned the area. Do you see any activity of the parties at the local level except when they want to get your vote in November? Were they standing next to the United Parcel Strikers the way the Green Party was? Did they come out and say you got to have stronger food laws? Are they really serious about campaign finance reform? Are they going to put an end to middle-class taxpayers being forced to subsidize $200 billion of corporate welfare every year while our bridges, mass transit, schools, clinics are crumbling, our libraries are closing? The rich are getting richer, more powerful, and our government is being taken over by global corporations who pit one country against another, bring people like Clinton to their knees, get GATT and NAFTA trade agreements through that allow foreign countries to challenge our health and safety laws, say they're too strong, they're keeping out foreign products because they're too strong, food safety, motor vehicle laws. They do this in secret tribunals in Geneva, Switzerland, under the World Trade Organization, and we're always likely to lose that battle because we treat our people a little more humanely than other countries. And other countries who treat their people less humanely or cruelly, they don't violate GATT. You only violate GATT if these secret trade judges in Geneva decide that our pesticide laws are too strong, or our air pollution laws are too strong. And just this week, we revoked, the EPA in Washington revoked an air pollution law that Venezuela challenged, affecting its gasoline that exports to the United States. They took us to the secret tribunal in Geneva. It's secret, it's closed to the press, no public transcript, you or I cannot sit in the room. And they won, and our government said, we're going to change our laws issued by the Environmental Protection Agency, supervised by elected officials. We're going to change and revoke that law because the secret tribunal in Geneva said we had to. That's what we're going to see more of. They're going to attack our truck safety laws because Mexico allows trucks to be carrying 175,000 pounds. Our maximum truck load is 80,000. Now, do you think anybody in this country thinks, other than the trucking industry, thinks that our trucking companies have too little weight on them? Well, under NAFTA, we're going to have to come to an agreement with Mexico because Mexican trucks will be going into 50 states pretty soon, and they're not wanting to reduce the weight limit. And our trucking industry supports the Mexican level because they want to pile more weight on more trucks in order to make more drivers carry more weight per hour and have less drivers working. And you'll be looking in your rear view mirror and you'll be seeing what those Mexican trucks are like. Not that they're going to go to 175,000, but they sure aren't going to go under 100. And so we weaken the safety on the highways, we weaken our food safety, and people like Dodd and Lieberman are gung-ho for the new world global order of global corporations controlling our democratic processes and subordinating. So the key thing here is to have a higher regard for our own significance as citizens. And it helps to look at American history in that regard. When people were fighting in the 1800s to abolish slavery, they were up against enormous odds, and they prevailed. It took a civil war. When women went for the right to vote, starting in 1846, it took them 60 years or more, they were up against not only men who didn't want to have the vote, they were up against businesses who didn't like women speaking out against child labor and other practices of the Industrial Revolution. And they prevailed, the women. And they were up over strong odds. And the workers who were up against the auto, steel, and coal companies, you imagine what it must have been like trying to form a union, the detective firms that the companies hired as goons to break them up. And these workers had no unemployment compensation, they had no other employment. And they prevailed. And the civil rights workers and environment. So we don't need to be sorry for ourselves that, gee, you know, whatever will be, will be. You can't fight City Hall, you can't take on excise. Not with that kind of history of courage. So we got to get together and see how fast it can occur. You know, let's just picking something out of the sky here. You know what it would take to build a major progressive political party in America that is of, by, and for the people? To get rid of government of, by, and for Exxon, General Motors, and DuPont?
Yay!
You know what would it take? Listen to what it would take. There are 165 million people qualified to vote in this country. Over half of them, about half of them don't even bother to vote. You know, it doesn't mean anything for them. They don't see that it has any effect. Then the politicians and the corporations are going to do whatever they want anyway. That's cynicism. That means you drop out, you become apathetic, and you don't count. That's exactly what the rich and powerful want. But if you're skeptical and you research back instead of cynical and drop out, that's what they don't want to see. So here's what it takes. To have a major political party that really begins to change things. No slogans, no rhetoric. 1 million Americans pledging 100 hours a year of volunteer time for a new political party, that's 2 hours a week, and contributing half of what they spend on soft drinks. And you got a new political landscape. And you can think up similar combinations. 2 million people, 50 hours a year, a fourth of what they spend on soft drinks, whatever. In other words, it's there for the asking if we really want it. Now some people may say, well, you know, things aren't so bad in this country now. The economy's up, unemployment is down, inflation is restrained. Have you ever noticed that those yardsticks are the yardsticks of the rich and powerful? They're not our yardsticks. Let me give you some yardsticks to show what the real picture is in this country. Number one yardstick of all time, economically. 25% of all children grow up in dire poverty in this country. The highest by far in the Western world. In Canada, it's 8%. In the Netherlands, it's 2% of children. And in Scandinavia, it's less than 2%. Now that alone is a condemnation that something is wrong with our economy. Land of milk and honey, biggest economy in the world, 1 out of 4 children growing up in dire poverty. Let's take another yardstick. The bottom 80% of the worker income, the people who get 80% of less income, that's tens of millions of workers. Their wages, inflation adjusted, have been declining for the last 23 years. That's a big chunk of workers, 80% of the workers. Here's another yardstick. This one is very key. In 1980, we had the highest wages in the world. We're now 13th. We were the biggest creditor in the world. We're now the biggest debtor. We have 22 countries ahead of us on infant mortality. In Washington, D.C., infant mortality is higher than it is in Jamaica, Cuba, or Bulgaria. Double that of the national average. Now, these are just some yardsticks, and you can see your others. In the Depression here in Connecticut, they repaired the streets, they built new libraries, and they kept their schools repaired in the Depression. Now look at the schools in Connecticut. Now look at the libraries in Connecticut. Now look at the roads and the bridges and the mass transit. Look at the drinking water system. And we have record profits in business, record stock market, and record executive boss compensation. And we can't even maintain our public works the way we did in the biggest depression in our history in 1930. That's just some of an illustration. Next week, when the schools open, there are not enough classrooms in America. They're in corridors, they're in sheds, and sometimes they're doubling up on their desks. In Washington, D.C., many of the students last year didn't get their books until November. November, one of the richest areas in the country. Notice, we are a country that has plenty of prisons, plenty of gambling casinos, plenty of theme parks. We don't have enough housing. We don't have enough school space that's properly maintained. We don't have adequate libraries. We don't have adequate mass transit. We don't have adequate drinking water, for heaven's sake. But we have plenty of the frills, of the entertainment, and of the facilities that the rich and powerful maintain for themselves. Just think what the three fastest growing industries in America are: temporary employment companies, prison construction, and gambling casinos. What does that tell you? So, my point is that if we develop our yardsticks, like child poverty, instead of Wall Street's yardstick, the scene is not very pretty. Even though Western Europe is not growing as fast as we are, they have far better safety nets, child care, universal health insurance, mass transit that's clean and that works, cities that don't look like they're totally run down, and they don't experience the massive slums that we experience. On the other hand, they have stronger labor unions. Maybe that has something to do with it. They have more political parties than our Tweedledum, Tweedledee Democrat Republican Party. Maybe that has something to do with it. And maybe they take to the streets more, like the French do. And they know how to say, we're not going to let global corporations run our standard of living down, and any politicians who dare surrender that way are going to be out of office fast.
Yay!
The way to get this done is two-track. One is we strengthen the citizen groups here in Connecticut, and you know who they are, and they like to have your help and participation. And the second is that we build a Green Party that really begins to throw the rascals out, a party that would not exist if it wasn't for, of, by, and for the people. This is a party, if I ever catch them taking special interest money, I'm going to be the first to tell you. This is a party that is going to sink or swim based on it being a party of, by, and for the people. That means they're going to rely on your volunteer time instead of money obtained by parties at rich mansions in Greenwich or Westport. That means they're going to rely on your very small but cumulative fundraising ability. And above all, they're going to rely on your imagination, your initiative, and your willingness to pioneer the good way to practice politics and make democracy stronger. We make democracy stronger. Our problems are being dismantled by the big global corporations who have no allegiance to this country other than to control it. Our problems are going to increase. How else could we explain a growing economy, booming profits, booming stock market, and all the problems which I've just described, and you can add more to them? The answer is the society is in trouble. You have to have more democracy, not less democracy, and you got to have the tools of democracy so that you as a taxpayer, worker, consumer, voter, citizen, and small saver can have power against all of these roles that we play in the economic and political system. So how many of you are already part of the Green Party? You can see the fancy decor. You like these chandeliers? See? This is the way to start a party. You want to start the two parties have made it so it's very hard to start a new party. They control the legislature and they build the barriers to keep small parties off the ballot. No more. Those days are going to be gone. And they're going to be gone because of work like the work done by the Green Party here in Connecticut. This is a very new party. This is like an acorn. And you know what happens to an acorn that's planted in good soil and taken care of? It becomes an oak tree. And an oak tree is very hard to blow down. It's very hard to get through. It's solid, produces a lot of new acorns, and stays around for a long time. So the Green Party emblem could well be that oak tree. Once we start achieving justice, we realize it's a great way of happiness. The pursuit of justice is the pursuit of happiness. If you don't believe it, go to a dictatorship where the people are living in misery and cannot pursue justice. But once we realize that citizen action is the pursuit of justice, it becomes fun, it becomes enjoyable. It's fun to realize that motor vehicle deaths are down by 75% from what they would have been if nothing happened 25, 30 years ago. It's fun when we clean up our drinking water, when we develop community services that are fresh and clean and responsive. We have universal health insurance and people don't live in dread that they're going to lose a lifetime of savings. It's fun when we know our children have good schools. It's fun when we realize we're not working off slogans, we're working off civic sweat. And in athletics, athletic sweat is a sign that you're really working at it. It's good. Athletes who train who don't sweat are usually just made of bones or they don't last very long. And so citizen activity and building a new party, once you get into it, it's a lot of fun. You meet a lot of good people who think like you, who've got open minds, who are going to explore and innovate, and pretty soon you don't go through life on your knees, you go through life standing tall because you have an estimate of yourself that's high and that is going to lead to an effective and strengthened democracy. So that's what it really comes down to. Not all Democrats and Republicans are bad, just most of them. and so when we criticize the Democrat-Republican Party, we're criticizing the controlling powers of it. Not that you can't find a couple of good Democrats in the legislature or whatnot. The point is that they can't get much done on the inside without outside pressure. And outside pressure means a new political party and stronger consumer groups. Well, let me give you an example of what I mean by a tool of democracy. We play 5 roles in our country: voter, citizen, worker, consumer, taxpayer, and saver, investor. Those are the 5 roles we play in our political economy. Those roles have no real tools anymore, and Lieberman and Dodd want to take over what's left and destroy them. Now, what is a tool for democracy? One tool is making it easy for us to band together around issues of common concern. Now, in the early 80s in Illinois, electric rates were going sky high, as they were here in Connecticut. And we asked ourselves, how can we get the residential ratepayers who pay those monthly electric bills organized? You know, it's too expensive to put an ad in the paper or go on TV with an ad. So we got a law through the legislature which required the electric, telephone, gas company, when they send you their monthly bill, to put this insert in the bill. Now notice, this insert has got a dramatic headline. Fed up with skyrocketing utility bills? Are you tired of hearing excuses? It makes you want to open it, right? Especially after you've seen what you have to pay that month. You open the bill, you open this little envelope, and it has a message to you: dear friend, when your local gas, electric, telephone company wants to raise its rates, it rushes to the Illinois Commerce Commission with an army of high-priced lawyers, expensive consultants, and the best experts money can buy. They can afford the best because you and I pay for them. Then they say join the Citizen Utility Board, $5 dues a year, elect the council directors, and they'll hire the investigators, attorneys, or accountants, economists to take on the company. Well, you know how many people joined? In 1 year, 200,000 people joined. That made this group the biggest consumer group in Illinois history, dues-paying group. Now, why was the company required to put this in their envelope? One, by law. Two, because it has a monopoly. And we give it a legal monopoly, an electric company, a telephone company. What do we get in return? The answer? The insert in this bill. This was printed by the consumer group, so it didn't cost the electric or telephone gas company anything, no extra postage, and this didn't cost them anything. But they had to put it in because that's the peak point of interest of consumers when they get their bill and they get this message. Now look what this little group did. It has a $1.2 million budget a year. It saved over $4 billion in unjustified rate hikes that it's blocked, including a $1.3 billion refund from Commonwealth Edison, the electric company in northern Illinois. $1.3 billion. It has educated people around Illinois, the membership, meetings on telecommunications, what's coming, all the things dealing with natural gas pipelines, and so on. Simple, isn't it? That kind of insert can be in your insurance bill, it can be in your bank statement, it can be in your motor vehicle registration envelope, it can be on your cable, and suddenly all over the country we have rising cable viewers action groups, bank consumer groups, insurance policyholder groups, and suddenly the balance of power begins shifting toward the people and away from giant corporations. We've got a lot of shifting to do because if I were to ask you, what do you own? Throw out some things that you own. Can I hear from you? Car. What else?
Television.
House. What else?
Shovel.
Shovel. What else?
Television.
Pardon?
Television.
Television. What else?
Refrigerator.
Refrigerator. What else?
Stove.
Computer. What else?
Furniture.
Now what if I asked you, what do you all own? What do you all own together?
Your luggage.
Public airways.
Okay, first one. We all grow up corporate. Even at law school, we never discuss this. We always discuss what we can buy personally. We never discuss what we own as a commonwealth. We own the public lands, 1/3 of America, the timber, the oil, the gas, out west in Alaska. We legally own these lands. We own the public airwaves together that the TV and radio stations broadcast. We own $4 trillion of pension money that own a lot of stocks. But guess what? We don't control anything what we own. The great commonwealth of property that we own, we don't control. The corporations control it. The timber companies, the mining companies, the banks, the insurance companies, they're the ones that control the investment of the pension funds. They're the ones that cut down that timber and clear cutting and leave the wreckage for us. They're the ones who get the gold and other hard metals free that are on our land because of a 125-year-old law that they passed. So that if a mining company goes on our land out west and discovers molybdenum or gold, they get it free. They don't pay us a thing for it, and they leave the wreckage and the cyanide contamination of the mine behind for us to pay for. So isn't it a good idea for a party like the Green Party to say, we're going to start a new movement here. The movement is, whatever we already legally own as a commonwealth, we are going to control. We're going to have our cable channels that have citizen activity, material information on students, on workers, on culture, free of the advertising censors and the advertising agencies. Our cable. We're going to have our TV stations. We're going to invest our pension monies in good things, not in anti-labor things, not in foreign currency speculation. We're going to have the use of our public lands so future generations can inherit them and say, those people back in the 1990s were pretty far-sighted, weren't they? They thought about us. They didn't give our patrimony away to a few multinational greedy gold timber, oil, gas, and other companies who have no allegiance to this country. By the way, last year I sent 100 letters to CEOs of 100 U.S. corporations. Union Carbide, Exxon, General Motors, Merck Sharp and Dome, Prudential, Metropolitan. I asked them a simple question. I said, you are a U.S. chartered corporation. You were born in the U.S. You grew on the sweat of your workers' brow. You were subsidized regularly by taxpayers. The Air Force, Navy, and Marines fight to protect your investments overseas and sometimes lose their lives. Whenever you're in trouble, you run to Washington for help and bailouts. Why don't you pledge allegiance to the American flag and the republic for which it stands, with liberty and justice for all, at the opening of every annual shareholders meeting that you have? They'll just get up and say, in the name of General Motors pledges allegiance to the flag. Simple. Born in the USA, sustained in the USA, defended by USA men and women in the armed forces, subsidized by taxpayers, bailed out by Washington. The least you can do is pledge allegiance. Not one said yes. Not one. They had trouble answering it because no one ever asked them that before. They tried to twist it and say, well, our board of directors is made up of foreign nationals and U.S. citizens. I wasn't asking that. I was saying the U.S. chartered corporation pledging allegiance. They have no allegiance to this country, these global corporations. They can quit at any time, export jobs, bring Washington and workers to their knees, shipping their plants to Indonesia, China, Mexico. The only thing they're interested in this country is controlling it and putting us on our knees. You know Nike shoes? Have you seen a drop in the price of Nike shoes in the last 8 years?
Not nearly.
You know who produces Nike shoes? Indonesian workers who make $1.80 a day. That's not a living wage in Indonesia. The head of Nike shoes last year made $5 million. One man. That's what's going on. So, are we going to get as upset as we do when our favorite baseball team loses? Speaking of baseball and football teams, look at these professional teams getting taxpayer subsidies for stadiums, arenas. We got all kinds of money, the politicians say, to subsidize the Baltimore Orioles or the Ravens or the Seattle Seahawks. But we don't have enough money for the schools, don't have money for the clinics, don't have money for this necessity or that necessity. Got money for Paul Allen. You know who Paul Allen is? Anybody know who Paul Allen is? He's one of the biggest welfare kings in the United States. He's worth $15 billion. He's one of the 10 richest men in the United States, Seattle, Washington. He said to the people of the state of Washington a few weeks ago, we just had a big battle with him. He said, I'll buy the Seattle Seahawks if you put in $350 million to build the stadium. I'll put 20% of the money in, you put 80%. I'll get 80% of the profits, you get 20%. I'll keep my books closed, and I'll make sure that there's a lottery that is developed just to subsidize my team. And he threw it open to the legislature. Now, mind you, in one day, this man has made more than $350 million because he owns Microsoft. Microsoft stock, $100 million. Goes up 3 points, $300 million. Since he got that subsidy from the people of the state of Washington, he's made $1.5 billion. So he goes to the legislature and he says, I want a special election on a special day to raise this money. They said, fine. He said, I'm willing to pay for the election. They said, fine, it costs $4 million. So he paid for the election. You know, the mechanics of the election. He puts $5 million in on television. He gives the opponents 30 days. That's all they had to organize against him. And they had no money. And he took control of most of the opinion makers because he throws a lot of money around. And he wins by 51% of the vote. He deceived the people of the state of Washington who thought that it was only the fans who were going to pay for the stadium. Only the fans. So here you have, for the first time in American history, a corporate interest paying for a special election to subsidize its special interest, keeping its books closed, laughing all the way to the bank. We're going to see more of that. It's not just that they're corrupting politicians. Now they're having their own special elections and paying for the administration of the election. The corporatization and commercialization of our society has never been worse and never bigger. You can go back to the Bible and you'll see what happens to any society that allows commercialism, that allows mercantilism. Mammon, you remember mammon in the Bible? To run a society, subordinate other value systems that are far more important: health, safety, justice, opportunity, respect for future generations, respect for nature. Subjugating, subordinating, it's on its way down. It's going to decay. And we have allowed too much commercialism. The Colorado school system had its budget cut. They sold their walls to ads for Burger King and McDonald's right in the corners. They put their ads right on their school buses. Every day you read something in the paper that 20, 30 years ago we would never have tolerated. One commercial incursion after another. You think 40 years ago people would have tolerated taxpayers funding the New York Yankees or the Brooklyn Dodgers with their tax money? Never. We're seeing this again and again. We're seeing that Ocean City, New Jersey now has a official city drink called Pepsi-Cola. Puts it everywhere. There was someone the other day who just wrote a book, Crisis in Our Churches, a professor of religion at Princeton. He says he expects in the next few years things are getting so bad there'll be a Pepsi cathedral. There'll be a Coca-Cola church. After all, that's a lot of space there, right? Look at that church nearby. That's a lot of valuable ad space. We're allowing commercialism to run rampant in areas that were completely off limits years ago. We used to say, stick to the marketplace. Now it's into everything. Government, religion, schools, universities, you name it. And we're just going to decay if we don't put a stop to it. 1 million people, 100 hours a year, contributing half of what they spend on soft drinks. Has history ever seen such minimal sacrifice? When you think what people have sacrificed throughout history, we can laugh these rascals out of here. Make these guys squirm for betraying and treading on our rights and opportunities. What is Congress? They call it Capitol Hill, we call it Wuthering Heights. Could have had a gold dome there. And it doesn't take that many people. So spread the word, read the materials, read books you've been wanting to read but you haven't had time to read. Find out why things are decaying and deteriorating. Find out how we're being sold a bill of goods that everything is just hunky-dory. And roll up our citizen sleeves and we can make history. And let me tell you, if we don't make history, we're going to be history. This country is being corporatized by multinational companies faster than you can flick an eyelid. But it can be turned around because we still have the votes and we still have the latent power as citizens. Our forebears showed they could do it. We can do it as well. Thank you very much. You know what this machine really is? It's called instant carpal tunnel syndrome. Unless you keep changing fingers.
Next time you have a rubber band on it.
Anybody want to say anything? Or?
Could I ask you something?
Yeah, I'll repeat the comment.
I was just did the Republicans take the same thing?
Yes, the Republicans, yeah, both sides, but you don't expect it from senators who say, right.
When you said that,
that's why we call them Tweedledum, Tweedledee.
Oh, I got it. Thank you.
What'd they do with my materials?
What do you want?
I started blowing away.
Yeah, if you want a little information on my point about Dodd and Lieberman, I don't have that many, but I got about 4 sets to send out, to give out to you. I have one.
When we hear you say the things you're saying, it's impossible to dispute what is so clearly right and important. And yet you're here saying such important things to a small number of people. My wish is to get what you're saying out to more people. And for example, in the last election, you weren't allowed to speak publicly, let's say in the debate.
In the debates, yeah.
Right.
Now, the question is, how do we get out to more people?
Or how can voters help to get somebody like you into the debate? Or how can you get out to,
In Hartford, there were Channel 3, Channel 8 there at Hartford. I don't know, it's over with now probably, but maybe they'll do it tonight. The Hartford Current, I think, was there. But look at the innovation. Here's one man from Hampton, New Haven. And he started a citizen TV on cable, the cable access. His program is called We'll Call You, Don't Call Us. And he calls politicians up, because it's designed to pull them out of their smoke-filled rooms and answer up to the people who are watching the program. There are a lot of things that can add up. In my hometown, we have the first reader-written weekly newspaper in the United States. A young reporter quit the Torrington Register-Citizen and started this up. And he has it now covering 7 towns like Canaan, Torrington, and it's completely reader-written. So that when we fought to save our hospital in Winston, and it was closed down by a mismanaged board and a president who didn't know what he was doing except making $500,000 a year running 2 hospitals, we're going to get it back. But the whole and every day that are important that never get on TV. The kid that commits a crime, he's on TV, or his victim's on TV. The kids that try to improve the community, they don't get on TV. We've seen this all over, we've documented this all over the country. Now, if I just met with some television station managers in New York, in Washington, the local ones, Channel 7, Channel 9, and they have a citizen advisory committee. But I got the impression they don't hear much from the viewers. That basically our expectation level for the local league news is so low, we watch it just to get the news and the sports scores. And just to get the weather and the sports scores. And see, what violence and calamity or catastrophe happened. And that's what they're feeding us. And our expectation levels are so low that we don't say, hey, you're not reporting on what's going on in the town. You don't have enough reporters. You're cutting corners on camera crews. You want to build up your profits by having this entertainment program whose main criteria for stories are violence, sex, addiction, or tragedy, natural disaster or what have you. They have it in their own shop. When they decide tonight, in televisions all over the United States, television stations, what stories they're going to lead with, you know what the governing principle is? This is their own language. If it bleeds, it leads. If it thinks, it stinks. Okay? So we got to elbow our way into this, and more, and then discuss, why don't we have our own TV time? Why don't we have our own audience network? An hour a day on prime time. We've already drafted legislation for that. In great detail, how to make it work, how to make it accountable. Why don't we have a student channel, a worker channel, a cultural channel, as I mentioned earlier? See, our expectation levels, they control us in part by pushing our expectation levels down where we get cynical and then we drop out, and that's what they want us to do. There are 20,000 corporate lobbyists in Washington full-time, about 1,000 citizen lobbyists. Who do you think's winning? What if there are 20,000 citizen lobbyists and 1,000 corporate lobbyists? It'd be a little different. So we don't get discouraged when we don't field a team. If you're a manager of a football team, and you were up against another football team, and all you could field was 2 players, the center and the quarterback, against 11 other players, and you lost 100-0, would you feel discouraged? Or would you say, we got to get another 9 people on the team? So it's a matter of how much citizen work we do. How many hours a month do we put on the citizen issues of our choice? Don't worry, you can work on the citizen problems of your choice. There's so many problems you could work on, the ones you choose. And most people are so discouraged or they say they don't know how, or they're too busy. We need citizen training clinics in every community. You know, these 3-4 hour training clinics where you go down, sit, 150 people, and you learn how to use the Freedom of Information Act, how to use small claims court, how to build coalitions, how to put on news conferences. No big deal. The trouble is we don't learn it in our schools. We should learn it in high school. We should learn it in college. But lacking that, we can teach ourselves that. We're doing that in Southern California with 1,000 citizens who are going to be organized to put initiatives on the ballot to strengthen democracy in the state of California. You know what we call them? 1,000 Oaks. They refer to each other as Oaks. And they become leaders in their community and put on citizen training sessions. So they have their own epicenter. And it's all so much fun. You cannot believe how they're enjoying it. You couldn't get them to go to a movie. They're having so much fun. That's the secret we have to unlock. Not only that democracy works, but it's a lot of fun. If you don't believe it, you know, all we got to do is go to some country where there's none of it. See how much fun it is.
Ralph, I have to drag you away.
Yeah, we have to go.
I noticed that the 2 near meltdowns that we had this past year in Connecticut didn't make the mainstream news either. Now, I want to own the sun again, if you know what I mean.
Right.
I want to know what I can put in Northeast Utilities bill that's being sent to me. How can I levy against the transnational of Northeast Utilities? Should we be forming electrical cooperatives? What do you have to say to us
First,
about that?
those plants must never be allowed to open again.
Yay!
And I said that, you know, by Long Island Sound, right? Last year. Second, they're too expensive to operate. And in electricity deregulation, they can't stay open to be competitive. They got to close them down. The problem is, are they going to make you pay for it? That's called stranded costs. The Connecticut legislature almost pulled one over our eyes and passed it this year. The Green Party opposed it, raised havoc over it, and it was pushed off until next year. The key is electricity deregulation that's consumer sensitive, not that's corporate shareholder sensitive. They blundered, they built these plants, they had our taxpayers subsidize them. They're going to close them down on the backs of the shareholders, not on the backs of the ratepayers and the taxpayers. That's the key. Once you get that, they can't open them because they can't compete. They cannot compete in a deregulated, competitive electric power marketplace.
Is the transnational considered a monopoly right now? Is there any leverage that we can use to get information out in a large way without it being out of our pockets? We're really struggling here with it.
Well, one is to use the internet. One is to use cable access. One is to support Green Party convocations on these transnationals. I mean, there are a lot of ways. Look, there's no forest that was ever built didn't start with seeds, right? So don't worry that it's starting small. It doesn't, I mean, the fact that it's starting small is not a bad idea. Not a bad. We're not, you know, we're not in some huge arena of 10,000 people where we say, come down to us, come down, walk down the aisles, you know, get on your knees, pledge allegiance to the Green Party. This is a thought movement, not a belief movement. Thought movement.
You've been very hospitable. I really appreciate you staying so late and waiting for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, does anybody want this? I don't have that many, unfortunately. Just one set.
Thank you. We want to help Ralph get on the road to the next one to be a little bit less lengthy than running.
Hey, next month's the vote. Next month's the vote on the FDA. You want your medicine? You know, it affects the flavors. It allows genetically engineered.
Every time I hear that he's speaking something, obviously. And I need it, you know.
Yeah, the food and water for your
Some of those people just go home and shut it down.
You know, that was a great speech.
Lieberman is out. Here's why Lieberman is tying the hands of the juries and the judges.
One particular thing to help focus our attention as far as our effect on the general public is that we focus on one issue. That is, generally the proposition that follow the money, find the truth. If we realize that our government essentially is being taken over by a system of bribery that simply drives everything that occurs in this country. And if we can focus this particular party on the sole proposition of strict public funding of all elective offices, then public input into the governmental process becomes a natural process in and of itself. But if we don't address that one fundamental issue, whatever little issues we happen to have here, so we will continue to be just that. If we don't control that one thing that drives the whole system,